Have you ever stopped to think about how Dracula became the most famous vampire of all time? From classic horror films to modern games like Castlevania, his image is absolutely everywhere in pop culture. But what many people don't realize is that this iconic figure is actually rooted in a real historical person, Vlad the Impaler. And believe it or not, the true story of this medieval ruler might be even more disturbing and chilling than any fictional version you've ever seen on screen. In this video, we're diving into the dark and fascinating transformation of Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, into Count Dracula, the ultimate symbol of horror. From the blood-soaked battlefields of the 15th century to modern Netflix series and top-selling video games, we'll uncover how history, folklore, and fiction blended into the vampire legend we all recognize today. If you're a horror fan, love a good gothic tale, or just enjoy creepy stories with a historical twist, stick with me until the end. You might be surprised at how deeply Vlad's legacy still haunts our screens, controllers, and imaginations. To understand how the Dracula myth came to be, we have to travel back in time to the 1400s, when Europe was in constant turmoil. Vlad III, also known as Vlad Gepek, or the Impaler, was born into chaos. He was the son of Vlad II, a member of the Order of the Dragon, chivalric order sworn to defend Christianity against the expansion of the Ottoman Empire. The name Dracula literally means son of the dragon, derived from his father's title, Dracula. But while the order was about honor and duty, Vlad III's reign would be marked by fear, cruelty, and infamy. As a boy, Vlad was taken hostage by the Ottoman Empire alongside his brother. This wasn't an uncommon tactic at the time. Noble children were often used as political pawns to ensure loyalty. During his captivity, Vlad was exposed to the customs, language, and military strategies of his enemies. Some historians speculate that this period deeply influenced his personality, perhaps even fueling his later hatred and brutality. When Vlad returned to Wallachia, he stepped into a political landscape full of betrayal, corruption, and constant threats from both internal rivals and foreign invaders. To maintain control, he chose to rule through fear. His most notorious method of execution was impalement, an excruciating and symbolic punishment. Victims were impaled on large wooden stakes and left to die slowly, their bodies often displayed along roads or outside cities as warnings. This terrifying tactic not only eliminated his enemies, but also cemented his reputation as a ruthless, almost demonic leader. To some, especially within Wallachia, Vlad was seen as a national hero who defended his people from Ottoman domination. To others, particularly his enemies and foreign chroniclers, he was a bloodthirsty tyrant. One famous story describes how he allegedly impaled 20,000 Ottoman prisoners outside the city of Targovik, creating what became known as the Forest of the Impaled. These shocking accounts, often exaggerated by enemy propaganda or traveling merchants, helped build the terrifying image that would eventually evolve into Dracula. But how did a medieval warlord become a blood-drinking, immortal creature of the night? That transformation began in the world of literature. In 1897, Irish writer Bram Stoker published Dracula, a gothic horror novel that redefined vampire mythology and left a permanent mark on pop culture. While Stoker didn't explicitly state that Vlad III was the inspiration for his character, the connections are impossible to ignore. The name, the association with Transylvania, and the themes of cruelty, darkness, and seduction all echo Vlad's legacy. Stoker's Count Dracula is a mysterious nobleman who feeds on the blood of the living, can shapeshift into bats or wolves, and controls the minds of his victims. These traits come more from European vampire folklore than from Vlad's biography. But the merging of names and setting linked the historical and the fictional forever. The myth spread rapidly with the rise of cinema. In 1922, the silent German film Nosferatu introduced a hideous and ghastly vampire based on Stoker's work, although legal issues forced the filmmakers to change the character's name. But it was the 1931 film Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi, that truly solidified the Count's image in the minds of the public. Lugosi's performance with his piercing gaze, slicked back hair, and thick accent created the archetype of the sophisticated and seductive vampire. Over the decades, Dracula evolved, along with the horror genre. In the 1950s and 1960s, actor Christopher Lee portrayed a darker and more aggressive version in the Hammer horror series, reintroducing the character to a new generation. By the 1990s, Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and starring Gary Oldman, brought a more romantic and tragic dimension to the Count, one that explicitly tied him back to Vlad the Impaler. In this version, Dracula's vampirism is born out of rage and grief, giving his monstrous actions a deeply emotional backstory. But Dracula didn't stay confined to books and films. As media evolved, so did the legend. Video games, in particular, embraced Dracula's mythos with open arms. In 1986, Konami released Castlevania, a side-scrolling action game that pitted players against monsters in a gothic castle, culminating in a final showdown with Dracula himself. The game's atmosphere, soundtrack, and villain design borrowed heavily from both historical and fictional sources. Dracula became the recurring final boss of the series, returning again and again, more powerful each time. As the Castlevania franchise grew, so did the complexity of its storytelling. In Symphony of the Night, players took on the role of Alucard, Dracula's son, in a tale that added depth and humanity to the Count. This Dracula wasn't just a monster, he was a grieving father, a misunderstood figure struggling between revenge and redemption. That emotional complexity made the character all the more compelling. Beyond Castlevania, numerous games have drawn on the Dracula myth. In The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, the Volkihar clan represents a powerful and ancient vampire bloodline, echoing many classic vampire traits. Vampire challenges players to make moral choices as a doctor-turned-vampire in Plague in London. Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, a spiritual successor to Castlevania, features a villain clearly modeled on Dracula, maintaining the aesthetic and thematic legacy. Even games that don't feature Dracula directly often pay tribute to his influence. In Resident Evil Village, Lady Dimitrescu stands tall, literally, as a terrifying vampire matriarch with gothic elegance and monstrous power, reflecting Dracula's lasting influence on character design and horror atmosphere. Dracula's shadow also looms over modern television and streaming series. The BBC and Netflix adaptation of Dracula reimagined the Count with new twists, blending old legends with psychological horror and unexpected turns. Meanwhile, family-friendly animations like Hotel Transylvania introduced a lighter, comedic take on the character, proving that Dracula could be both terrifying and endearing depending on the context. So what's the truth behind all these portrayals? What's real and what's pure fiction? First and foremost, Vlad III was never a vampire. He didn't possess supernatural powers, he didn't turn into a bat, and he certainly didn't drink blood to survive. His fearsome reputation was largely a result of brutal wartime tactics and sensationalized storytelling. Many of the most gruesome tales about him were spread by his political enemies, especially the Ottomans and German merchants, who had every reason to paint him as a monster. The impalement stories, however, are well documented and supported by multiple sources. Vlad used terror as a tool of control, and the psychological impact of his cruelty helped him maintain authority in a chaotic region. But the myths about drinking the blood of his enemies or eating their flesh are most likely exaggerations or symbolic metaphors taken too literally over time. It's also important to note that Vlad ruled Wallachia, not Transylvania, as so many fictional versions suggest. Wallachia was a separate principality, though his family did have ties to castles in Transylvania, which later authors used as a more mysterious and dramatic setting. The mountainous landscape, remote villages, and dark forests of Transylvania were perfect for Gothic horror. So it made sense for storytellers to place their vampire lord there. Now that we've unpacked the history behind the fiction, it's easy to see why Dracula has become more than just a character. He's a cultural icon. He represents something timeless: the fear of the unknown, the seduction of darkness, and the enduring power of myth. Dracula adapts to each generation, taking on new forms while keeping his core traits. He can be a romantic anti-hero, a monstrous villain, or even a comedic dad running a hotel for monsters. That flexibility is what keeps him relevant. The historical connection to Vlad the Impaler adds an extra layer of intrigue. It reminds us that even the most fantastical stories often have a kernel of truth. When history, myth, and creativity come together, they create legends that transcend time. And maybe that's why Dracula never truly dies. As long as new stories are being told, his shadow will always be nearby, lurking in a castle, hiding in a video game, or waiting to return in the next great horror story. Now it's your turn. What's your favorite version of Dracula? Do you prefer the elegant and mysterious vampire from classic films? The tragic warrior from modern games, or the savage figure rooted in historical horror? Drop a comment below, and let's keep this conversation alive. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into history, myth, and pop culture. See you in the next one.